Ask the Podcast Coach for December 17th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means hi. It's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and today we're going to get our nerd on. That's definitely sure for today. We're also going to talk maybe a little brand safety. When's the best day to publish your podcast? We might cover that. It's all based on the chat room and where they want to go. And the guy that's going to help me wade through that is that guy right over there. You know him as Jim Cullison from theaverageguy.tv. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. Snowy, blustery Christmas feels like morning. So welcome to the week before Christmas. But for those who don't know, you have a week till Christmas.
Yeah.
Get moving.
You better go get your stuff. Or for those of us whose family go out of town, this is Christmas weekend. I'm doing Christmas tomorrow because most of my family goes to Florida to hang out with in-laws and things of that nature. So if you are new to the show, we're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live. That's where the YouTube chat room is. And or if you want to go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, you can jump right into the video. But before we do that, we should probably get your pour on. And of course, that pour is brought to you by our friend Mark over at podcastbranding.co. He said hitting the button. If you need artwork, for your podcast, I've used him for the Podcast Rodeo Show, the School of Podcasting logo, Ask the Podcast Coach. Mark is not only a great graphic artist, but he's also a podcaster. So that whole, I have to explain what a podcast thing is, goes right out the window. In fact, if you had to, which you don't, you could, because Mark's going to sit down with you one-on-one to really understand your brand and make sure that, the artwork he's designing fits in with kind of the vibe of your show. Probably going to listen to an episode or two. He really goes the extra mile that you're just not going to get from a guy on Fiverr, and it's going to look great. Now, if you need a lead magnet or a full website or a branding kind of audit, he can do that too. Everything is there at podcastbranding.co. And I always make this joke, but it's true. He's Canadian and he's going to be polite. So check him out, podcastbranding.co.
So good to have the coffee in the morning. Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. A new episode out, 220, The Man Who Invented Christmas. Dave, are you telling me an American invented Christmas? It wasn't Santa since the beginning of time?
Shut your mouth. That's blasphemy.
Well, you can find out. It's over on the site right now. Based on a True Story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for your sponsorship.
And just a thought for anybody thinking about, should I start a podcast? Do you realize the plot to every Christmas special is, wait, Christmas is canceled? That's the plot of every, oh my, what are we going to do? There's that. So, also, if you're listening to us on the Wisdom app, if you click the little button beneath my blinking head, that'll request you to come up on the stage. We'll be happy to take your question that way as well. But first, of course...
And now... Oh, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
It's I love the kids. It's good to get your nerd on or have a nerd because Santa came early for Dave. That's right. It's a Mac Mini. Still in the paper. I haven't unboxed it yet because, as I mentioned...
Blasphemy.
Yeah.
How long have you had that, Dave Jackson?
That showed up yesterday, and I went...
Okay, all right, I'll cut you some stuff.
And I went, if I open that, I'm done. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm going to get stuck. And instead, I went down many rabbit holes on hubs and docks, and then the whole thing is, if you get some sort of dock with an HDMI port, does it do 4K at 60 hertz, not 30? And I was like, wait a minute, most videos at 24 frames per second. Why do we need, but then it's not frames per second, it's hertz. And I was like, I don't know, I need a nerd. And I know
you've you know this one that you podcast with on Saturday morning. I think you're actually better in the initial setup of this thing. I think you're better off, and for most podcasters, this would be my advice, especially if you're on a Mac Mini. Just set it up on one monitor. So don't try to do the two monitor off the Mac. You can. I went ultra wide, so I'd get that extra space, but you can do a single monitor on it. And I don't necessarily know if I'd buy the dock right away. I think I would set it up, get rolling, figure out if you actually need it. Like there may be some things you can do differently that I'd invest in hard drive space as opposed to a dock. But there's just some things you can do, you can think about. And then keep your Windows box, set that on a second monitor, and there's a program called Synergy that you can use one keyboard and one mouse across both Mac and PC. And so it allows you to kind of have both up as you're making the transition, because you're going to spend a bunch of time transitioning these computers, right?
Yeah. One of the things I'm going to be doing is I noticed as I looked at my PC, and one of the reasons it's probably running out of hard drive space is I'm not doing a very good job of cleanup. So for me, I will download all the files from the Rodecaster, which I need maybe 2 or 3, and instead I get like 5. And I'm not going back after it's done and deleting the files I don't need, because I use Hindenburg. And what Hindenburg does is it makes its own folder. Like when you're done, the Hindenburg folder is everything you need. Anything else you could delete. And so I know there's a bunch of hard drive space that I could clean up with that. And I have a ton of, Musicians Coolers files, which is a podcast that's been dead for about a decade at this point. And I don't want to delete it, but I know there's a service from Backblaze that's made for backing up stuff that you probably should throw away. And it's like dirt cheap. And I thought rather than, taking up more space on even if it's a, external hard drive, I'm like, I just need to throw it in the cloud, because I'm always like, oh, there's that stuff that I should probably throw away, and getting rid of that. But the fun thing is, originally I thought I was actually thinking of taking my PC, moving it to the living room, which meant buying another desk, buying another monitor, for the Mac. And then today I woke up and it was like, really, I have 2 monitors here. And I thought, I'm not the kind of guy that's doing video where I have one program taking up both screens. It's usually, Dave School of Podcasting stuff on left monitor, Libsyn stuff in Firefox on the right. And I'm like, we're just going to swap it out. Instead of being things in Firefox on the right for Libsyn, I'll just do, maybe I'll do my Libsyn stuff on my PC and do all my podcasting stuff on the Mac. So that is the plan. And then I thought about that. Before I go buying a hub, because one of the things that's cool about these hubs is you can add additional hard drives. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But I also thought, before I go blowing another $100, let's see if we need it, Yeah. And because I was really worried about the dual monitor thing, and I was like, well, wait a minute. If I'm not really using a dual monitor with one program, I was like, let's just put the PC on this one and the Mac on that one, and we'll go to town.
It's a great way to transition. So keep your Windows PC and the monitor that the monitor that you use the most often, because there's a lot of muscle memory in what you do with a computer, right? Brain muscle memory, where you're used to looking for things or finding things, whatever. So, leave that main monitor in front of you, PC. Then take the monitor out of the PC, plug it into the Mac. You'll need a separate keyboard to get things started. So keyboard and mouse on the Mac. You'll need to borrow one or find one or whatever to make that work. But so get them both up and running separately. Right. And give yourself some time. That way you're not like, some people make this huge mistake. They're like, I'm throwing it in the studio today. And you're like, probably not a great idea. Get the thing set up, because there's some steps you're going to need to do, Dave. I'm going to walk you through a few of these, but there's some steps you need to do before you really move that thing into production. And then once it's kind of set up and you've got, you've got it the way you like it, then you can switch it or leave it. Doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, right? That's the beauty of it. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you do unbox it, you're not going to unbox it on the air here. So they're crying for that in the chat room. Unbox it, Dave. No.
Here's what's in it: the Mac Mini and a power cord.
That's it. It's not necessarily that exciting, but So for those of you who at Christmas time are getting a new PC or maybe a Mac, there's not a lot of this on a Mac, but after the initial setup, right? So we talked about that, how to get that set up. Set up is something separate. You got to kind of de-bloat the system. Now, the Mac doesn't have a lot of bloatware, if any. I don't think it has very much on it at all. But our PC friends, those come with a ton of bloatware, right? So you got to kind of go through, uninstall some things to get some stuff figured out, delete some things, get familiar with what's there, and then take it out. And then you'll need to do this on both PC and Mac, regardless of what you have. Start your updates. This is why you don't unbox it and then just try to go right to production, because Dave, you're going to have some updates. Even though that Mac was just shipped from China like a week ago, right? It's still going to have a bunch of updates on it, right? So you got to kind of sit down, go through, get the updates rolling, get it up, do its thing. And then I think spend some time getting familiar with the operating system. Dave, you said it's been a while, right? It's been a while since
I have an old Mac Mini that I only bought so I could do GarageBand tutorials. That was it. And I did my GarageBand tutorials, unplugged it, kind of said, I'll keep it plugged in. And it's got to be, I know at least 2, if not 3 operating systems behind. So eventually, once I get the new Mac Mini plugged in, I am going to turn it off, plug in the old Mac Mini, and update the operating system. And that old Mac Mini is going to church. That's going to be our check-in, check-out computer. But it's been years. So I know the chooser and preferences and a couple other things. So I always, through my whole life, I always end up on a Mac. I'll do something with it, and then I'll move into a new position, and I'll go 5-6 years without touching a Mac, and then one will come along, so that's exactly where we are now. It's been probably 5 years since I bought that original one.
Well, here's the good news: in the 5 years you've been away, everything's gone to the browser. Yeah, that's it. And right, browsers are all the same. When you're in StreamYard in the browser, it works just like the same on a Mac as it does on a PC. So I've gotten to the point, I have a Mac in the middle for me. I have Windows to the left, Windows to the right, Mac in the middle. I've kind of set it up so that I don't know the difference. Like, I don't think, I need to go to the Mac to do this. Right. It's based on where do I want to do the work, right? The main difference is when you close out the screens, to close it out is in the upper left instead of the upper right, right?
So here's the question. I'm a big Chrome guy on my PC, but I also know that anytime things get weird, I go into my task manager and I see where there's 4 million instances of Chrome running, even though I only have 8 tabs open. I'm like, that's weird. And it seems to take up a lot of things. Is that the same on a Mac, or should I just go all Safari all the time now?
It just depends what you want to go with. Chrome on Mac is just fine. If whatever you're going to use them consistently. This is why Chrome is, for why most people are using Chrome across the two, because it runs pretty well on both. Now I'm going to get some feedback on that from the chat room. Use this, use Brave, use Edge. You said nobody ever. Yeah, I know. Right. Neil said,
bloatware equals Microsoft Edge.
Yes. Oh, it's gotten very bloated. I think the key to this is, of course, you can't run Safari on Windows. So if you want a consistent browser, you're kind of left with either Brave or Chrome if you don't want to use Edge. Those are the 3 big ones. The key for me has been to make sure in the browsers you have the sync turned on, so that the browsers are syncing across. And this is the cool thing. They'll sync kind of across OS. So again, it's like you don't even have to think. You don't even have to think about it. So that is I think your browser environment is the first thing you get set up right? As you're getting in there, you're getting things set up. Get your browsers, because you're going to need your browser then to download the software and do some of the other things that you're going to do. Then I think go ahead.
Well, Chris had a question. He goes, I found out years ago that Firefox is more of a resource hog than Chrome. Is that still the case? It can be, because there are times when I'll be like, I'll start swearing at Chrome, fire up my task manager, and I see that the thing that's really gobbling up my memory is Firefox, because I use Firefox for my libs and stuff just to keep things separate. And I'll be like, oh, well, wait a minute, hold on, So it's
all browsers are actually pretty bad. Yeah. Right? Now, if you're kind of a resource if you're watching your resources all the time and you go, so like on Windows, if you go into the right click on the taskbar down below, go to the task manager, there's a resource tab and it'll show you what's using CPU, what's using memory, what's writing to the hard drive. It's alarming. Like that don't do that right before you go to bed, because you'll have nightmares about wasted utilization all night long. Right. So all of those, all of them, all the browsers are bloated in a lot of ways, especially on PC, not so much so on Mac, but it varies from time to time. Chrome, Google Chrome was out the gate first. They seem to have settled down. Microsoft's Edge browser came in, uses Chromium, so the same engine as Google Chrome. And it was very plain in the beginning, and it was actually kind of nice. And now they've bloated it out, right?
Of course.
So Brave is a nice alternative. They don't spy on you like the other ones do. It's kind of crypto. It's got some weird crypto stuff in it. But again, it's kind of a learning curve to get up to date on it. Well, so get your browser set up next.
And you said the magic word, learning curve. And that's another reason why I didn't open it up last night, because I just knew. I was like, okay, but I also know that there's going to be a time when I'm plugging this in and I get it up and the monitor comes on and I go to do something and I'm going to be like, I think it's here, it's there. And I'm going to be kind of frustrated because I don't know exactly what to do. And you just have to realize, knowing that going in, that, hey, when I'm uncomfortable or whatever it is, whatever verb or adjective you want to use, that's normal. And it's not going to be forever. I will eventually figure this out and go that route. And,
Well, that's why I like, Dave, I like keeping your setup, your current setup intact.
Yeah.
First. And running another instance, running your Mac right next to it, because it gives you the chance to still continue to work. And then look over at the other PC. Okay, how would I do this? So think about it from a podcast production standpoint. So this week, you're producing your podcast this weekend. You could have the Mac next to it, and you could be thinking, okay, I do this for production. How am I going to do this on the Mac? Right. And so you slowly, maybe over the course of a month, you slowly start moving all those processes over, because there's nothing more frightening than when you've taken that PC down and you can't get back to it. And then you're like, there's a key on there I needed, right? There was something on there I needed, right? Yeah,
that's the nice thing about this, is opposed to, oh crap, my hard drive failed, my computer's dead. I can make this transition as slow or as fast as I want it. And like you said, I think I'll probably open this Sunday when I get home from Christmas, plug it in and let it start doing updates. So, and then just from there, but really a lot of it is going to be cleaning up my PC and figuring out, who's storing what and that whole 9 yards. The program you mentioned, I forget, because I know Dan said he loved it.
Keyboard and mouse is called Synergy, SYN.
And that runs on the PC or the Mac, or how does that work?
Yes, the answer is both.
Okay.
So you go to their website. I would purchase their Pro version, and then they have a Mac client and they have a PC client, and you just download them, run them, and then decide which computer you want your keyboard and mouse to be the kind of the server of, right? What's it plugged into, and then you go to the other computers and just point them. You can either put in the IP address, or sometimes it just finds it on the network, which is super cool. And it says, hey, I found this computer. Do you want to bring it in? And it brings up this 9x9 grid that says, where do you want the monitor? And so you can place it next to it or above it or below it. Just kind of depends on what your monitor setup is.
Huh, cool.
And then click apply, and all of a sudden your mouse goes across and you can move the mouse. Now, remember, for those using this kind of software, the mouse needs to be in focus on the computer it's being used. So if you take your mouse over to the Mac and you start typing, it'll type on the Mac, not the PC, right? That's how it knows where the focus is for you, is based on the mouse. Again,
a fun little learning curve there.
It's not as bad as it seems, although sometimes you'll click and then drag your mouse like by mistake, and then you'll start typing and you're like, hey, where where'd the cursor go?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's over on the other computer, right? So,
Neil says, yeah, don't change from PC to a Mac when there's a deadline looming. And then DR is saying, getting rid of bloatware is problematic. The program names are so ambiguous. Don't get rid of pregnant screwdriver because you need that to run the thingamabob, and of course the doohickey, and you find out later. Yeah, exactly. That's always fine.
with bloatware, know what you're doing. So oftentimes it's sitting there; it's just fine. Like you could leave it if you don't know. It's good. It may be good not to just go mass delete things because you might be removing a driver. You might be, something like DR said, something else seeds. So, okay, so. Once you get that all set up, you've got two important decisions to make. Do I install antivirus? Right?
I would say yes.
How do I do my backups? Yeah. And most antivirus software have a version for both PC and Mac.
Yeah.
So for you, if the answer is yes, long ago, we had this little bit of a myth that Macs just don't get viruses. Right. You don't need an antivirus, right? Well, partially true. Sort of. I put antivirus on my Mac. You might want to do that as well. Most companies have a version for both, and I like keeping it consistent, even though the clients will be a little bit different. At least you kind of keep it consistent. Then you'll have some backup decisions. Mac Time Machine is fantastic. My opinion, by the way, from a piece of local backup software. Time Machine on the Mac works great. So I would put an external drive in, then go into Time Machine and set it, forget it, and it just backs up. It's on Windows, that is a nightmare to back up, right? For most people. For the average guy on a Mac, backing up with Time Machine, that's one thing I think the Mac does really, really, really well is that local backup. You get into a file, you mess it up, you're like, oh crap. You just jump into Time Machine, grab the file from yesterday. It's back.
Done.
Right? Super cool. Yeah, super cool. So you'll have, and then I think once you get down to antivirus and you've got your backups kind of taken care of, then you kind of start figuring out, okay, where do I want to keep files? And this is where for podcasters, I think this is important because you had said you got files all over the place and maybe you've done the best file management of them, right?
Yeah, I need to, I know I finally decided I just called it sentimental stuff I have now in Microsoft OneDrive. I was like, that's going to be the thing. I do that. Mm-hmm. Yep. I have client Zoom meetings in MediaFire, and then I have all my podcast stuff is on an external hard drive. I think it's 2 terabytes. So that's going to be the fun one is I will have to move those 2 terabytes to probably another hard drive. I will format a hard drive on the Mac and then move those files to the Mac hard drive. We'll have to that's going to be this would be a good one to sit down and think about. Yeah. Where do things want to land? So that Windows, your old Windows computer would make a really good file server. I like the way Windows manages files. I don't like the way Mac manages files. So I would have a drive on that Windows side. You don't need to change anything. No OS change, whatever. Just use Windows. But I would create a network share on there where you kind of keep the files that you want. Yeah. And then I would run the backup software on the Windows. By the way, this may be controversial for some people, but I would run the backup software off Windows to go wherever I'm going to the cloud. Yeah. So you have Time Machine Backblaze. Covering your daily, so Backblaze for you. So Time Machine's covering your daily production stuff. You're moving those production files onto the Windows. We'll call it a server, but a Windows box that then's moving those files to the cloud. And you've got some pretty good backup then, right? You got 2 local copies and a copy in the cloud. You've got kind of a storage for it. By the way, that doesn't mean you need to change your MediaFire. You can still continue to use OneDrive and MediaFire for it. Yeah. But it does give you the ability to have one box that's doing all the backup to Backblaze, because you're doing that today, right? You're using Backblaze. Yeah, that has saved me multiple times. Like you said, where you're like, oh, crap, I deleted that file. No, I emptied the trash. No, and you're like, hold on. Yeah,
it's gone. Yeah. It's gone forever.
Neil is saying migrating from a PC to a Mac would be the perfect time to map a network share to Google Drive. I know some people that love Google Drive, and I know other people that like everything else. You either love it or hate it. So that's always...
Well, I loved his map, a perfect time to map a network share. I love this idea of just maybe even documenting, okay, here's my storage strategy. We have so many files. Like we have live files that we create. Okay, this was the live instance that we did. Then here's the edited audio. Here's the edited video. Here's the video final production. Here's the MP3. I ran this through whatever you run it through. Yeah. Here's the final MP3. Mike Howard, my good friend, passed away a few years ago. I think he kept like 9 for one podcast, like 9 copies of things, right? And you're like, dude,
yeah.
Like, do you need that many? Now, hey, listen, whatever makes you sleep at night, right? That's kind of important. But Dave, this may be a great time to kind of think of a not a backup strategy. That's important, but do I know where I'm storing everything, and what's my strategy for this? I think every podcaster could do this during the holidays. Little storage audit, like, hey, can I get it back?
Because I found, like you just said, I have from the old, Windows PC, they had a folder called My Webs, and for whatever reason, when I was using Front Page back in the day, I put all my webs in there. So I have stuff there that has, and the only reason I keep those is those also then have the pictures that were on the website and things like that. And I know I have probably 3 different versions of my webs, and I don't delete any of them because I'm always worried if I delete that's the one that had, the old band photos in it. So I just storage is cheap, who cares, whatever. But it is a pain in the butt when you go to find something. That's the problem, is when you have to then look in 3 places. But so.
Well, hey, Dave, Uncle Marv didn't hear. This is a long segment. We should probably remind folks what we're doing. So can you play the music one more time?
Yeah, absolutely.
And now, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
Such a great. This is the best day of the year for me, Dave. You got a new computer. Yes. I am so geeking out over this. It's super cool.
And who knows, I don't know how long. I bought a year at StreamYard. I'll have to sniff it. I know everybody that uses Ecamm, which only works on a Mac, loves it. I also know it sounds like there are times that Ecamm is that kind of thing that does everything. That's the good news is. But now you're like, wait, where's the thing where you do the under thing? It's like, so it might be something that I look into, but it sounds really cool. But the more I hear people talk about it, they're like, oh no, you can do that, but make sure. There's always a make sure. It's like, oh yeah, it's cool, it's easy, it's great, it does all this stuff, but just make sure you do this. And that's where I go, so it'll be,
yeah. Well, I've learned, and I built a brand new PC that I'm doing for VR. As a matter of fact, we'll show this. The VR box just came in. So MetaQuest 2 is in the house. It still is in wrapping as well. We're terrible. We bought this stuff.
We just
behind
tease people.
Me. It's been sitting there the whole time. Yeah. Behind me over there is the headset for it. So we'll be setting that up later on this weekend. I think the key on this for podcasters thinking about setting up that's different than normal, just your normal PC folks, is you probably have more processes than you think embedded in the systems that you have. So don't be in a hurry. If you get a new computer for Christmas, Dave, I applaud you actually for waiting to set this thing up. You did the right thing. I was a little afraid this week that we'd be doing this call, you're doing this show on the Mac. And I was like, I don't know how that will go, but wait. Take your time.
That's a little thing called experience that, comes along and you go, yeah, I know what's going to happen when I open that box. The other thing I thought was really weird, and I guess I'm sure there was a box that I didn't check because I'm always home, but the UPS guy set it on my stoop and knocked on the door. And by that, I mean, he went, I know you can't hear that, but that's the whole point. I mean, I thought somebody might have bumped into the house. It was literally like, that was it. And I was like, was that a knock? And I was like, oh, wait, it's because it was supposed to originally show up the 22nd. Today's the 17th. It showed up yesterday. So it showed up early. And I was like, I wonder if that's it. And I see a UPS guy, getting back into his truck. And I was like, man, that's not cool. And I open it up and there's this box. And I'm like, it's big enough for a Mac Mini. And I open it up. I was like, man, it's the holiday season. I don't have to worry about my neighborhood too much, but if people are going to steal stuff, now would be the time to do it because all the good gifts are showing up now, so it'll be interesting to play with. And I just, it's like I said, I started to get a little nervous last night. I was up till about 1 a.m, just going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And I was like, you know what? You don't have to make any decisions. Just chill.
No.
And I woke up this morning and was like, oh, here's a novel idea. Why not just take one of your monitors and turn that into the Mac, and then you'll have your PC to do whatever you want and go to town. So there you go.
It's good. It's a good call. One more topic, just one more on this before we go. And here's the question. What do you do with your old PC? Right now, I'm going to try to convince you that you should turn that Windows box into your storage server, so to speak, to use for all your big files and some of those kinds of things. That's a unique, I need to know what kind of hard drives you have and the setup for those kinds of things. But for many people, they need to recycle their stuff. And this is where it varies by location. Here in the United States, Best Buy will often take your computer for recycle, and they'll do it gladly, and they don't charge you. CRTs are different. If you have an old CRT, they're going to charge you $50 or something for that. Make sure you've cleared your hard drive, and I'd put a nail through it. If you're going to turn your hard drive in, I just literally take it to the workbench, get a nail or a screw, and just drive it right through the hard drive. That'll finish it off pretty well. There's programs you can use that'll clear it for you and those kinds of things. But
we're going to hit the button again.
And now, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
Wow, 3 in a show.
I know. Are there any of those micro mini PCs viable for things like podcast production? The ones about the size of an Apple TV.
No.
Okay. I know. I heard Adam Curry talking about some machine that was like $300, and I was like, yeah, that can't. No.
I mean, okay, you could make, depending upon your workflow, you could make it work. For some people, they're like, I'm going to prove it to you that I can do this. No, don't do that. You need some, if you're especially if you're a video podcaster, if you're moving the stuff to YouTube, if you're doing any video, this is more than I've talked ever in my life. Any video editing at all, you'll need some horsepower on that to get it done at any length of time. So in most cases, if it's audio only and you have just a few requirements, you might be able to get away with it, but I wouldn't go the cheap route.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, talking a lot, I had a weird experience this week. I did a webinar for Libsyn, which is weird because when I do a webinar for Libsyn, I become Libsyn. Like the words that are coming out of my mouth are Libsyn. And I wanted to ask you, I know you've done, a ton of webinars where you're like, Captain Gallup. Does your mouth go like, I mean, every ounce of spit ran out of my mouth. I was just sitting there and like, I'm like, so always have a glass of water near you or something. I've never ever had that happen to me. I always have the thing when I speak live, my hands turn whiter than they normally are and they sweat. But this was like, I'm talking and everything's cool. And I'm trying to channel my inner Elsie and be kind of like, hey, thanks for coming. We're so glad you're here. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, the woman that's the product manager for Libsyn Studio starts talking, and I'm just like, I've never smoked pot, but I now understand what dry mouth is. I was like, holy cow. That was fun.
Yeah. I keep coffee by the desk all the time, just for that. But it's good to have a glass of water.
Yeah.
And
Dan by the way, Dan. So, what do you call it when you have like Kleenex? Like you are the whatever.
You're the brand. You're the brand.
I watched like 3 minutes of the new Will Smith movie on Apple Plus, and it comes up and yada yada, produced by so and so, and then of course the screen goes black, and in all white letters it says based on a true story, and I was like, Dan. So you are now. When I hear horses, I think Glenn, and when I see the phrase based on a true story, Dan, you've done a very good job of your branding. That I was like, oh. It's Dan. Dan's been here. Dan will probably be here in the future. I don't know, but it was crazy. So that was fun. I have a question for you, Jim.
Okay.
This is I need a second opinion. If you're new to this topic, I am a person that believes the listen note stats is caca poo-poo, because when you say I'm in the top 2%, you're comparing yourself to the show from, 2007 that hasn't put out stuff. And so I was on YouTube and I took the comment offline because I said, dude, you do know that's a crap stat. And his answer was, why are you trying to pee in my Cheerios? You're making it hard to stand out. And so my question is, like, I've always made a list of, I've always outed companies. Like, for the longest time, Kajabi didn't do 301 redirects. Now they do. They, by the way, still horrible. I don't want to take this tangent, but they changed the GUID, the unique identifier of every episode. That is so bad. But anyway, so this guy, so my question is, I had no problem outing a company and saying, I disagree with what they're doing over here. If I do it to a person, it seems almost like a page out of the curmudgeon manual. You know what I mean? And I was like, shit, because people are going to see that as like a feud, if it was like a radio feud. And I was like, I don't know if I should,
Nah, you should just let it go.
All right. That was
just, it's so much easier. Like, and we all have trouble with this when somebody's, I just got a text message this morning from one of my customers who was like, hey, have you heard? And then there was this whole thing that wasn't even true. And you're like, yeah. And it, just for like the next half hour, that's all I could think about. Mm-hmm. Right. And so when you run into those kinds of situations, I would think if you have any inkling that it's the wrong, like if it's 1%, you feel wrong about it. You should listen to the 1%, not the 99. You want to lash out, but just go, no, because at the end of the day, Dave, I don't think much of this stuff matters. I just don't think it matters.
Yeah. What are you? I see behind the scenes you are sharing a screen of some sort.
That's just my YouTube. Yeah, it's just my YouTube.
Okay.
No, that's sorry. Sorry, I'll stop sharing.
Well, you ready for a fun clip? I am not anti-advertisement at all. I just worry about, in fact, I'm talking about this in a future episode of the School of Podcasting, but there's a study, or I shouldn't even say a study. It was my study. I did it. But here's the thing with ads in your podcast. Let's say that you have a 3-minute break. All right, great. So you play 3 1-minute ads. Great. Now, next episode, you still have a 3-minute break, but instead you put 6 30-second ads. It's the same amount of time. Your audience is going to be much more perturbed hearing 6 ads than 3. And I was like, that makes so much sense. And I didn't realize it until, because it's, the holiday season, I turned on the Hallmark channel and I was watching this one movie, Jim. I don't know if you know the name of it. It's where the really hot single girl and the super hot single guy, I forget, they hate each other at the beginning and then they end up falling in love at the end.
Every other Christmas movie, you mean? Is that the name of it?
But what was weird is the ads. I kind of liked it in a total, like, this is what podcasting does to you. You're like, oh, look, I'm getting ads for mixers and just things that were much more feminine, not
Cialis.
Yeah, but it was but there were a ton of ads. And I remember, here's why I think this is true, is after about 2 or 3 ads, I was like, okay, like, let's get back, because I got to find out if she's going to find the ring and the cake or whatever. And it's just another ad and another ad. So I found that interesting. And on Kevin Schmidlin's show, Grow the Show, he has a radio guy now on his staff. And he said, yeah, that's absolutely true. It's not the time, it's the number of ads. So if you're I know I did the one little test where I put 15-second ads 7 different times in an episode, and people are like, yeah, don't do that. That's because I kept thinking, well, it's only 15 seconds. It's not really interrupting things. So anyway, so that was that. I'm going to star this one question from Uncle Marv, but I wanted to play this because this is what they keep talking about, brand safety. And my joke is they're going to turn podcasting into Up With People, which was this super brand safe group from the 70s of young people jumping around and being positive and uplifting. So anyway, this is a clip from Pod News Weekly Review. I'll put a link in the show notes out at askthepodcastcoach.com/419. But they're talking to this company called Barometer, and Barometer listens to your show. They do transcripts and all this other stuff, and they're going to kind of give you a grade. But listen to I'm just going to play the clip.
Challenges for brands that affiliate with a show that may be safe, but the host is not for reasons that happen outside of the show. So we get a sudden emergency email that a host we're sponsoring was caught wearing a shirt that said something controversial in the wild. And all of a sudden, this is a topic. So if you thought that you're only responsible for the show, you are not. You are responsible for the behavior of that individual to some people, to some stakeholders. And so really important that you get visibility into that as well as what's in the show itself.
Wow. I mean, are there any examples that wearing a shirt can't be a proper example, can it?
No, that's a real example. Absolutely. Yeah, there was a podcaster who wore a shirt that didn't make any sense to me. Not something I would have recommended that they wear, but they were wearing it and someone snapped a picture. Somebody put it on the internet and Twitter was ablaze.
So I heard that and it was like, so your Northwestern shirt or whatever you have on there, Jim, is
Northwest.
Yeah.
Northwest Bearcats, Missouri
highly
State.
Offensive, man.
Northwest Missouri State, yes.
Somebody's going to put that on Twitter and it will be, when I heard that, I was just like, here we go. And I kind of get it. That's not really new because I remember there was somebody on Patreon that got kicked off of Patreon for something she did outside of her show, which was something like she tried to, something with Greenpeace or something, and it was slightly illegal. But I still was kind of like, yeah, but that's like, let the police throw her in jail. Don't take away her Patreon. But that's just it's a weird thing. And I just wanted to bring it up and go, here's a weird thing that's going to happen. And you can find that weekly.podnews.net is where you can find that show. But I just was
who's the British sounding guy?
The British guy. That is the one and only. Come on, say it with me. I say it every show.
Who?
James Cridlin.
I've never heard of him. Never. Is he important?
Everybody drink. Come on.
Is he doing things? I've never heard of him. I don't know. Got nothing.
The other thing I thought we could talk about.
Listen, I am now trying to figure out ways each week to say something on this show that James Cridlin will put in the newsletter after the Podomatic incident, and it showed up in the newsletter. I thought, wait a minute, he listens to Ask the Podcast Coach. Maybe I can continue to get shout outs in his newsletter.
Yeah.
Assuming I knew who he was.
Well, Neil has a point here. Now, Neil, again, has been in radio forever and TV as well. He says, I'm surprised that people are surprised by this. You start a podcast, you become a media personality, and brands are super careful about who gets the carry bag. Yeah. I guess my whole point was, I still think of podcasting as an audio thing. But in this case, obviously, if they're taking a picture of a shirt, it was on video,
YouTube.
And I guess my worry is I could see if I said, and I'm just making this up, let's not go crazy. This is an example off the top. But so if I said, Polish lives matter, right? The phrase lives matter is a lightning bolt. And somebody's going to go crazy if you wear a shirt that says something like that. So that's where that person might be, well, I'm proud of and I'm not Polish for the record. Is Polish even the right word? Is it?
It is. Yeah, that works.
My whole thing just about,
and they do matter.
Yeah. So my whole thing is just offending people because I just heard a great. I'm going to credit Jerry Seinfeld. He called it flash paper something. So I'm going to throw the word personality on that because I think some of us have a flash paper personality where there is no. 0 to 60. There's no 45 in there. It's like we're either cool or we're enraged. And I was like, So my worry is I'm going to wear a shirt that says WKRP, which is on its way, by the way, thanks to TeePublic. I was like, that's excellent.
Nice. It's a great show.
Yeah.
Unless those letters mean something.
Well, that's the whole thing. But that had Johnny Fever, and he was pretty much a misogynist. And, the way they depicted Lonnie Anderson, and I'm like, yeah, it was 1979. All right, let's go. So I think one of the things I'm going to be interested to see, I've got a feeler out, is there's a thing called errors and omissions insurance. Because I started looking into this because of the, I think we talked about it here about the show, Is That a Cult? Did we talk about that? Is That a Cult is a show where people would go, the Boy Scouts. And I'm just, again, making this up. I don't know if they did that, but it would be something like the Boy Scouts. Is this a cult? And they got dropped by their network. They were on like one of the biggie network thingies that you've probably heard of. And it is rumored that maybe they were worried because they started going after big groups and saying, hey, is that a cult? And apparently not everyone is thrilled when you accuse them of being a cult.
No.
And so
turns out they're not.
yeah. So I was like, huh. And I just wonder if, as we, again, start thinking about brand safety and worrying about people suing us, are people going to start investing in errors and omissions? Because that's a thing where you go, oopsie, I didn't mean to say that. Did that hurt you? And then, you pay $20 a month.
We have automobile insurance. We don't mean to run into people, right? It's not like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go out today and ram into as many people as I possibly can, right? So I don't think it's a bad idea to have like some insurance for those kinds of reasons, especially, we're saying things off the cuff, right? We're saying them instantly. Oftentimes we're having to react to things that are going on in the chat room. I'd hesitate to go back and listen to some of our back catalog episodes, right? And you go, yeah, I probably said some things wrong. In this business, it might be smart to have some insurance. We don't mean to say those kinds of things, but sometimes you do. At Gallup, like I won't do a podcast without either Gallup gear or just plain, like I wouldn't wear this hoodie, even though it's just supporting the school. I wouldn't do that for Gallup podcast. Has anybody ever said anything to me about that? No. It's just what I choose to do. I just kind of try to keep the brand. Now I have enough gear that I just pretty much wear Gallup gear for every single podcast that I do. On to these, like this one and Home Gadget Geeks, I just try to wear non-controversial stuff. I don't think, I'm not sure the Northwest Bearcats are going to be controversial this morning or not.
Who's your arch rival?
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a good question. I don't know, but they're good. They have a good football and basketball program. My daughter went to school there, so I don't know. I figure like I'm okay, but I don't. The insurance idea. This may be one of those where you kind of go, yeah, we have homeowners insurance, we have car insurance. Those are both for accidents. Saying something inappropriate or wearing something that, because Dave, in some cases it's not intentional.
Right.
In some cases it is, right? It's absolutely intentional. But in some cases, by the way, a Bearcat's not real. It's a fictitious, I think it's a fictitious mascot. But in some cases things just slip out.
Right.
And so like, that's like in an accident when you slip on the road, you don't intend to hit the person, but you do. That's why you carry insurance. So I don't think it's such a bad idea.
Yeah, I haven't. I'll put a link here. I Googled it and found Thimble, some company that does all sorts of insurance, but they have actually a page. It's like, are you a podcaster? And I was like, well, look at these guys being up to date on everything. So, I don't know that it's one of those things. It's like, you don't need insurance until you need it. So,
well, most people don't. In this case, most people don't, right? The liability you're carrying, because that's what you're carrying here is liability on this. Did you say something or do something where someone can sue you for actual physical damages?
Yeah.
That's kind of what you're insuring there. So
yeah, there was an article that again, everyone drink. James Cridland had pointed out that
you keep mentioning this guy. I have no idea who he is.
On a sports podcast, somebody said something very disparaging about an umpire, and they took the guy to court for who knows what, but he won quite a chunk of change. And I was like, so I need to, I'm sniffing this area of insurance because I'm just like, all right, we're all, a flash paper, environment, maybe we should do that. So I'll have to.
Well, DR asked a good question, right? She says, do TV news shows have insurance? And I don't know if they do or not.
Neil would know, maybe.
They probably have corporate insurance, and they probably have corporate lawyers.
Yeah.
So that's their insurance, right? Is they have lawyers who they because boy, in the news industry, can you imagine the number of? Can you imagine the number of lawsuits?
Yeah.
It's got to be huge.
Yeah, nothing but. So the other thing, let's see how we're doing on time. Good.
Can I get some coffee while you're?
We can definitely
while we're transitioning.
As soon as there we go. Excellent. I'm starting to see, remember how we talked about the new crop of podcasters and how we kind of get the same crop, and we're not complaining. It's just like, look, the kids have come back, the looms, look, Norman, the looms are back. It's
freshmen, the freshes.
And so I'm seeing things that I was like, huh. So, and the theme I'm seeing, and I could be wrong, is, I often am, is it appears when you first start a podcast, you assume other people are going to promote it for you. And I'm like, So one question was, this was from somebody named Steve. This was from a Facebook group. What's the consensus here on fellow podcasters who reach out to be on your podcast? You're in the same genre, but they don't extend an invite to theirs. Do you take it as an affront or do you not care? I'm interested in your thoughts. And I was like, because to me, if they're in the same genre, I guess on one hand, well, if that's your, again, this is one of those, it's your podcast, do what you want. But if the only way you'll let them on your show is if they let you on their show, I'm like, the one thing I don't hear in that equation is the audience. It's all about me. And so I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't expect. I don't expect a return.
Yeah,
a return. I don't expect them to even advertise for me. Let them know. Hey, it's available. A lot of my guests on Home Gadget Geeks are already podcasters. They know how to do this, and if they're going to do it, they will. And if they don't, it's okay. The value for me was in the interview, not in them sharing. I'm not trying to steal their audience. It's great. Oftentimes they'll mention it or they'll make their audience aware of it or whatever, right? We get some, but I have pretty low expectations there. Even with the podcast we do at Gallup, I have some pretty low expectations for our guests. I kind of see it as my job to do the advertising and to get that out there. And I'm not there to steal their sheep.
Yeah, and then
it's not why I'm there.
We got this one, again, in a Facebook group from Stephanie. She said, hi, friends. Have you ever run into issues where the interview guest is not promoting the episodes on social media? I've had several people on my show, and they didn't post about it or even repost my posts about it. I've provided marketing materials to all of them, and still, it's crickets. Any tips on how you go about asking your guests to promote their interviews? And I politely said, have you ever thought if I asked Jim the same 6 questions that he just answered on a previous interview, I always bring up Pat Flynn. And if you're not familiar with Pat Flynn, he was an architect. He lost his job, he sold an ebook, and now he's, a millionaire. And I'm like, everybody that if you stand next to Pat, you're going to hear that story a bazillion times because it's a great story. But Pat's not going to share that with his newsletter and all of his, primary audience because they've heard the story. Cliff Ravenscraft's story of I used to sell insurance and my dad wanted me to take over the business, but I started okay, we've heard it. So if you've interviewed somebody and walked them through their story, their audience has heard that. They're not going to share that again. So I think that's one of the things I don't think people think a lot about. Like, okay, go listen to other people's interviews of that person. Now I realize that's crazy talk because, wait, I'm supposed to research the person I'm interviewing and then see if there's something that you would have asked that they didn't so that the interview is a little different. And I know you can do the Larry King. I want to come in and I don't want to know who they are at all. So I'm super curious. And again, it's your podcast. Do what you want. But I just thought here it was again, people are expecting other people to grow the show for them. And I was like, So do you?
Well, we've touted that in the Facebook groups and Reddit and all that other stuff as a way to grow your audience. I mean, these, people who podcast about podcasting always say, yeah, a great way to do this is, get on other people's podcasts or have high profile guests on yours. Neil, right? This is Neil. He says, Did I get that? Yeah. Crickets with interview guests tend to happen when they don't bother to build a relationship with that person beyond inviting them to your show. Like, listen, they don't know you. Like, oftentimes, exactly. They don't know who you are. Yeah, you had them on the show. You might maybe spend an hour with them, maybe a pre-call of a half an hour. Maybe your interview wasn't very good.
Yeah. Like, yeah. I don't know how you say that politely. Like, hey, maybe,
maybe you weren't very good in the interview, and they're afraid to show it or they're afraid to share it with their with their audience.
Here's a classic example. I did an interview kind of swap thing. Big lesson on that. I don't want to talk about it too publicly because it's easy to figure out who it is. But their version of our interview, I'm here to tell you, where you'll hear me talking and I'm like this, and then all of a sudden in the middle of my answer, and I'm like, and I'm like, to where I'm like, I'm in the car. I'm like, I can't hear the rest of my answer. And I'm like, surely you hear the volume going up and down. I'm not sending anybody to that interview because it's horrible. Not the content. And the person's a very nice person, but I was like, how can, because it's a podcast about podcasting, and it's like, wow, if you were my student, I'd be like, yeah, don't put that out. That's here. Run that through Auphonic and you're good to go. But I was just like, yee. So that's the other thing. If it's not a great interview, or it's, I forget what I was listening to the other day, and they even said, we'll get the interview in just a minute. And whatever they were talking about was not great. And so 9 minutes in, they finally started introducing the person. And I was like, maybe that's why people aren't sharing the interview, because people have to wait to the 27-minute mark to get to the content.
I've been developing a relationship with a thinkcomputers.org podcast that they're on my show. I'm on theirs. We've been kind of going back and forth. They show up at their live stream. They've shown up at my live stream. Like, we're building, so the audience knows who they are, and their audience knows who I am. And so we spend some time, kind of working that together. And I'm sure that has brought some folks over, but that's taken more than just a single time. They've been on the show dozens of times at this point, and it's taken a little effort for me to show up to their live stream so that their audience kind of knows who I am from that standpoint. So I think, Coach D, someone said this in chat just a second ago, the relationship matters, right?
Yeah, that was Neil.
If they just show up. Yeah. Okay. So So the key to this, though, I want to come around, is Randy's question. He says, what agency would you go through to get a higher profile guest? I think there's actually very little value in high profile guests.
Do I not have applause on here?
I would not. Listen, I know that's counterintuitive, and I know everybody's saying go after the big fish. I just don't like. That's just not what people are looking for. I especially see brand new podcasters trying to do this, where they haven't really honed their skills very well, and then they're going to interview somebody who gets interviewed twice a day all year long, and they're going to fumble through it, and it's not going to be great. They're going to think it's great, but it's not going to be great. I'm just not a fan. Now, the exception to that would be if you're in a niche, and that high profile guest is an important influencer in that niche, right? Where from a community standpoint, they're really respected. That could be a different scenario. But for me to get Pat Flynn on Home Gadget Geeks to talk about his gadget setup, listen, my audience isn't going to know Pat Flynn any more than anybody else. So they'll just be, like Pat, he was pretty cool. Yeah. Right? They won't know, do you Pat Flynn? Kind of deal. No, it's just not going to work for my audience.
I took a line from Ben Franklin. I can't remember his original thing, but mine is, it's not the size of the guest that brings the value. It's the size of the value that makes the guest. So I always use the example. I remember the first time Glenn Hebert from the Horse Radio Network came on my show. Glenn was, well known in the horse space, but he wasn't known that well in the podcasting space. Right. He came on and people were like, wait, what? Who is that man? And I was like, exactly. So I don't have applause, but like Neil, the quote we were looking for is, crickets with interview guests tends to happen when you didn't bother to build a relationship with that person beyond inviting theme to be on your show. What do you think, David Lee Roth? Whoa! Whoa! Exactly. So,
listen, there's always exceptions to this. So, somebody's going to come out of the woodworks and say, oh no, Jim, that's not true. I did. Well, you're the one in 99. In a lot of cases, it's just now, if interviewing a high profile guest is your dream. Yeah. And that's something that's going to add value to what you do. And it's just been like, oh, I've always wanted to interview fill in the blank, right? Do it.
Well,
have them on.
The other thing I could see it doing, is when you get that one high profile person, it does make it easier to get other guests.
Yeah.
Because you can say, here's my show. We talk about such and such. I'd love to have you come on the show. In the past, we've interviewed people like blah. And they go, oh, well, if so-and-so's been on the show, I should be on there too. So I could see that. But in terms of hiring an agency, here's my problem. I have agencies contact me daily with pitches that are so bad that if I had somebody that said, hey, Dave, I listened to this episode. You talked about this. My client does this, and I think they'd be great if you ever want to talk about blank. I'd go look at that agency and go, wait a minute, I might hire them to represent me. I've never had that done. And the only time somebody did it, all they did was copy the first few sentences of my blog post and put it in to make it look like they listened. And my favorite was, and it was really cool, the guy, their client, that was trying to get on my show actually recorded a personalized video for me. And it was like, hey, Dave, want to say, thanks, here's who I am, blah, blah, blah. And I really love the show. And then he said the wrong name. And I was like, oh, so close. I did email him. And he's actually going to be on the show. He wrote a book. He's all about mindset. But I was like, I love the effort. That's not my show. So I thought that was pretty funny. So the trick to that, so to answer Randy's question, Randy S. there in the chat about where can I go, and he gives a little clarification. He says I have basically a comedy oriented show, information, entertainment type podcast. So if you're looking for entertainers or comedians and you're going high profile, you're going to have to go through their agents. And so you're going to have to know somebody who knows somebody on this. This is not a look them up in the phone book. The phone book is here. The phone book is here. That it's not that situation. You're going to have to go through some booking agents to get that done. As an example, if you wanted to get Brian Regan on your podcast or Jim Gaffigan, two comedians that I just really like. Yeah. You're going to have to work through their agents to get them. You're probably going to have to pay for them, and your chances of getting all the way there are pretty slim. So for the big names, you're going to have to go through their agents to get that done. You can go, there's plenty of Podcasts Connect. Is it Podcasts Connect or Podcast Connect? Or there's a bunch of subscription, a couple. It's podcast singular, guests plural, podcastguests.com. Or if you go to podcastingresources.com, there's a bunch of them listed over there. The one thing you can do if you're trying to get, celebrities is make a list before you spend the money of people you would love to have on your show, and then sign up for IMDb Pro for a month, and you can get the information for their agents and go that route. Or ping them on Twitter. I mean, Troy Heinrichs from he's all involved with the Blacklist Exposed, and it happened by sending a tweet to one of the writers, and that eventually got him in there. So, that's always
you're going to have to be persistent on this if you're going to want to get through to the Michael Hyatt. I tried to get on our Gallup podcast at one point, and it was 4 or 5 months of emails back and forth. And then at one point I had Michael booked, and a week before they're like, oh, actually Michael's busy. Can I get you to one of his, we've got Dave who's just as good. And I was like, no, I wanted Michael Hyatt. That's why we did this, right? He had talked about Clifton Strengths, and their organization uses Clifton Strengths. So you're going to have to be persistent. You're going to have to be patient. You're going to get bumped kind of based on how big of a deal you are. Chances are you'll get bumped. Robert Scoble was another one I interviewed back in the day. And man, that dude at the time was so busy. Oh, yeah. Getting his time was next to impossible. And I got bumped down the road a couple times on that one. So you get ready for that to happen too.
Well, that happens. I mean, I feel Neil's in the chat room, and originally we were set up to interview Neil today, and then I forgot that Christmas is this weekend, and so I had to cancel that. Neil, if you're available, by the way, I sent you an email yesterday because Christmas has now been moved to Sunday, so I'm available on Saturday. But I realized your weekend's probably booked. But don't get too. The only time I ever get slightly upset is if somebody bumps me twice, and that's when you're kind of like, all right, what's But again, like you said, if it's a Robert Scoble, or it's not Robert, what's I forget who the guy.
Robert Scoble. Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
And then Michael Hyatt.
Yeah. So, but you know who would never bump us? Our awesome
supporters.
That's it. And I want to do something different today. Let's see if I can do this. Our awesome supporters, of course, are at askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. And I looked this morning and, oh, that's interesting. I'm getting hit with a giant pop-up screen. Our awesome supporter for today is, and we've talked about him in the past, and he's also, I don't know if I'm an official co-host, but I'm on here a lot. This is Greg from the Indie Drop-In Network. This is the guy, again, if you have a scary show or true crime, you can basically go over and put your show on this network and it'll help you, here's the Podcasting Power Hour. Speaking of that, I'm now on that on a regular basis. Nice. It's a Monday night, what do you call the live Twitter thing? Twit, stream, something. Yeah, Spaces. It's a Twitter Spaces.
Is this Twitter still? Is it still there?
It's still there. Yeah,
it's still there? Okay.
It's hard to believe.
I know there's some people worried about it.
Yeah, but anyway, Greg has a bunch of stuff over there at indiedropin.com, and he's one of our awesome supporters. So, Greg, thanks for your support. And I need to stop sharing my screen. Here it is down at the bottom. That's the topics we can pick from in case anybody.
Is that secret info?
No,
is that our secret?
No, so you'll just see where here's the question that I just read. This is podcasters. Oh, I forget the name of this program. Studio that is also changing the way they do business. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do this and go to this page because, hey, Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you want to try Podpage, try podpage.com. And if you want more Jim Cullison, and hey, who doesn't, go to theaverageguy.tv, check out Home Gadget Geeks. And when you think podcasting, think School of Podcasting. And of course, if you'd like to have Dave in your pocket, go to daveinyourpocket.com. That's a new coaching without calendars thing I'm doing. And of course, everything is at askthepodcastcoach.com/support. So thanks to all of our awesome supporters for, not making us hate life while we're editing and all the other work we put into this. So let's see. We have an argument going on in the chat room while I was gone. I see we're okay. So we have, I know higher profile guests would want to do a smaller podcast. That's not true, because they know they are using you to help your podcast. It doesn't help them as much. Now, I don't know if you would call the drummer from Ozzy or the bass player from Ozzy, big names. They were to my audience. They were like, holy cow, you got Carmine Apiece? And I was like, yeah. He came on my show in 2006. So to say it was now at the time, it was probably one of 100 podcasts, so it was easier to be a big fish out there. But Neil is saying if they wanted something that will be worth their time in most cases, networks and PR people are more concerned about metrics. Yes, they are. In fact, here's a good question on this. I had a podcast, I don't know, what do you want to call it, manager. I don't want to step on DR, but there's different things where it's they kind of do everything for you, but they were coming to me for free, which again, whatever, that's what this is. And they wanted to know, how do I know who are the most popular shows? Because we can't see everybody's stats. And I'm like, well, there's Apple Podcast stats, but that's not a popular, that's who's trending now. You can go to Chartable, and again, that's kind of who's trending now. And she's like, well, how do you know which show to go on? I look at the content and go, yes, I can help that audience. I don't really look, I've never asked. In fact, I started saying no to the smaller shows because in some cases I would be interviewed and it would never go live. That was annoying. But on the other hand, I said, I don't do interviews. I said, I do interviews for two things: to help their audience and to start a relationship with that person. I said, because I know at least 3 times that I've been like episode 3 on a show that never made it to episode 10, but that person remembers that I came on their show when they had no listens, no downloads, and I came on episode 3. So the fact that I came on again, I didn't get a lot of downloads from that, but I got a relationship from people that then later when somebody says, hey, like, I see you have a podcast. Where should I go to learn? They're like, oh, Dave is the nicest guy. You got to go to Dave. So there are two reasons for that. So I personally don't look at numbers. And when I see somebody ask me, how many downloads do you have? They're not here to serve my audience. They're here to serve them. And that's not always a great fit for content in some ways. So I don't know. What do you think, Jim, on this whole, like, I should only go on big shows?
No, I think do what you want. Like there are some strategic things that you can do to kind of help, kind of think through. Yeah, this will help. You just never know though. Like you never know, going both ways. One, being on shows, like you never know that little show. You know, I've done some first episode, maybe in the first 10 with some podcasters, you know, and you're kind of thinking, well, you know, is this worth my time? Yeah, it is, because people are worth my time. So for me, I'll be on anybody's show. I don't mind. But I've had some, I mean, I was talking about this in the chat room. I've had some high profile guests on Home Gadget Geeks before they were high profile.
Yeah.
So Jamie Siminoff, founder of Ring, which sold to Amazon. He's a gajillionaire at this point. So, you know, Ring doorbells, those kinds of things. Yeah. He came on Home Gadget Geeks. They weren't part of Amazon yet, but he came on, he thought it was valuable to come out. We had a great conversation and had a great relationship with him. Mark, the CEO of Zapier, which has become a big, fairly big player in this space. They came on, this was years ago now, and got to know him. Super nice guy. We had a great conversation about Zapier. I've since asked him back and I get nothing. Like that's one of those things. I probably haven't tried with Jamie Siminoff just because I know. I don't know. Maybe I should try.
Well,
I should try.
Dan says you'll never know who will agree to be on your show until you ask.
It's always going to be a no if you don't ask.
Yeah.
Right.
And realize no is not always no. It's not now. I mean, I know Pat Flynn. I asked him probably 3 times before he came on the show, and he kept having kids. And I was like, where are your priorities? What do you mean? My wife's going to have a baby. Come on the show. But when he had a product, he had, a plugin for podcasters. I was like, he has something to promote. So that's another thing. If you're going after big people, wait till they have a movie or a book or whatever it is they're doing. So, then they might come on. Neil says famous people enjoy good conversations, period.
Yep.
Many of them could care less about your numbers, be interested and worth their time. Yeah. To me, it's all about, you know, do you fit my audience and can you bring value? And that's really all I'm looking for. So,
yeah, you never know. I've had Agent Crew from Wine Spies on my show. They're a fairly large flash sale, wine company that use this cool locker technology to be able to, they sell these bottles, move them into a locker, and then when the locker's full, they'll ship them to you for free. He didn't have to come on my show. It wasn't a direct tie. We had the best time. He was super cool.
Right.
And we just had a good time talking about wine and technology and some of those kinds of things. Out in California, the fires, some of those kinds of things that they have to. So, I mean, I would ask. It never hurts to.
All they can say is no. It's like,
yeah.
And then you can say,
I've been looking through the.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No.
Well, I mean, I feel like Chip and Dale. No, you first. No, you first. But you could always ask them when they say no. You could even ask them, is that a not now or a you don't think you're a good fit?
Yeah.
Because they might come back and say, yeah, not now. So keep that conversation going.
Yeah, you never know. But set your expectations accordingly. Like, don't get, just because you get turned down by, let's say you ask Joe Rogan to be on your podcast, and then you never get an email response back. Don't take it personally. Nobody. Exactly.
I guess we'll go here. DR has a question. And that is, well, what about John Lee Dumas charging an arm and a leg for his appearance? Keep in mind, John has a large audience. Yeah. And chances are the person that wants to charge, maybe not so much. So that's a great experiment in capitalism and supply and demand. So John was getting, I can't imagine the insane number of pitches he was getting to be on a show. So how do you slow that down? Go, well, if you want to be on the show, here's the fee. So that would slow that down. and bring that. So I think that's the biggest reason he did that, would be my guess. Now, I have already voiced, to me, I think that's a really slippery slope for people that aren't JLD, because what happens is you start charging people, whatever, $300, and then Susie gets new braces and you get the pool that you've been waiting on. And all of a sudden, that extra $300 that you had is now not extra. You need it. And now you have to have a guest pay you $300, and you'll take anybody with a pulse as long as they got $300. Because what happens is people are paying to be in front of your audience. And if you let anybody get in front of your audience, the audience is going to leave. So that's my biggest worry about it. And I'm always a big fan of, like, look, you're bringing value. You know, I don't think you need to pay. You're paying me in value is kind of how I see it. But I know lots of people differ on that opinion. So, but that's my thoughts on it. Let me go back to the thing we were looking at earlier. Here's one that I thought was interesting. Again, kind of the whole, maybe we just need to do the work. I've been sitting back reading and thinking of starting a podcast for the last 3 years. And I'm here to tell you, if that is you, you're not alone. I've known a few people that have done that. But I'm not sure if my topic is something that is needed or not. 5 years ago, so first of all, if I just stop there, Jim, what would you say?
Well, if my topic is needed or not?
Yeah.
To that, well, what's your audience think? I mean, what kind of feedback are you getting?
Yeah.
That type of stuff, yeah.
He says, 5 years ago, I found myself starting over in my late 40s after my 23-year marriage fell apart. I'm thinking of doing my podcast on starting over all of that, the ups and downs, the struggles and hard times, and what I did to rebuild my life. Well, that's a cool story. So what does everyone think? Is this type of podcast needed? And so my question is, are there other people in their 40s that have gone through a divorce and are starting over? I think the answer to that is probably people in their 30s and their 50s and whatever. So the nice thing about that is if somebody hears that and they're like, crap, now I've got this weird thing at Christmas where we've got to do 2 Christmases with the kids because they got to go to their moms, and then they're going to come over to me, and bam, bam, bam. It's a hassle, and I don't know what it is. And then you hear somebody else is going through the same thing. You're like, oh yeah, I'm not the only one going through that. And that can be huge, for that. So, but my thing, I answered him and I said, what's your why? I said, because usually the podcasters I see that really enjoy it and have fun are people that aren't thinking about doing it. It's, I need to do this. I need to get this information out. People need to know this. People need to hear this. And it's that passion that pushes them through the first couple of years that comes in handy. So I just heard that, and I was my knee jerk, without knowing this person at all, was maybe you shouldn't start a podcast. I encouraged him. I'm like, look, people will listen to that. But I didn't hear the I need to get this out kind of thing. But I don't know. Thoughts, Jim, on that?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you on that. I think, when I started blogging back before podcasting, in one of the very first blogs, I wrote to myself, I don't care if anybody even reads these. I do them for me. And I think some of those kinds of podcasts where it's personal in nature, whatever, life hacks, whatever, you're going to have a niche in there, and it's going to keep it fairly small anyways. And the motivation almost needs to be for, like you said, for you first. If you attract some listeners and you do a good job and you market it well and it picks up some steam, there may be some things out there for you. But I think getting those expectations set right from the very beginning is important. Well,
DR asked a good question, but what if he asked it differently? Maybe he's really saying, can I compete with all other podcasts out there of the 40-year-olds starting over? And the answer is, can you? Yes. Will you? I mean, think about it right now. If we go back 5 years ago and somebody's in college and they're like, I don't know if I should go pro or not. I mean, I'm never going to compete with Tom Brady. He's the greatest of all time. I shouldn't, I'm not going to go pro, whatever. I can't compete. Well, Tom Brady's going to eventually retire for good.
No, he's going to be a robot. He'll have robot parts. How can I throw the football today?
But if the only reason you're getting in is to be the best of all 40-year-old starting over podcasts, that's a great goal. But just realize it's not going to come from your guests sharing your show. And, you know, all the things we talked about were like, we want other people to do this for us. It's like, it takes a lot of work. So, and again, can you compete? Realize it's a competition.
Yeah.
And that's where the more you niche down in some cases, like, hey, you just cut out your competition because now you're doing it for 40-year-old men, not just 40-year-olds. It's 40-year-old men. And then if you know, however you want to do it. But if somebody, to me, I don't know. I mean, look, I want to be the best website to learn podcasting, but it's what I did this year. I doubled down on the people that have decided I want to learn from Dave. And that's when I said, look, unlimited consulting. I'm going to smother the people that have decided to go with me. And if that then makes me, if they go tell friends that, hey, you got to go learn from Dave, maybe I will eventually become the number one place. But I just know that everybody and their brother's teaching podcasting. And if I think about that, I'll just curl up in a ball and go, there's too much competition. No, I'm not going to think about that. I'm going to focus on the people who are focusing on me. And that then grows. So it's.
Well, and will you? Maybe. Are the chances it won't? Yes.
Yeah.
How will you know? You try.
Yeah. I mean,
you give it a try.
I always use the analogy, like, what about a writer or an actor or an athlete or a musician? You know, we all start off to be, you know, the top. Some of them make it. I mean, the one thing I watched the Bruce Springsteen interview on Howard Stern. You know Howard, and I'm going to tell a story about my dad and motorcycles. But he said he was on stage, and he goes, to my left was Mick Jagger, and to my right was George Harrison. And he said, I thought to myself of all the kids that picked up a guitar, and all the kids that eventually joined a band, and of all the kids, and he just kept going, that got a record deal, that got played, and did. He goes, I don't know why it's me. He goes, I don't know, but, you know, he goes,
this situation was just right for him, right?
He's like, I just know I worked really hard, and he was talking about all the weird gigs he did.
He didn't quit either.
Yeah, that's it. He didn't quit.
I mean, think about his career in the 70s. It could have been over in the 70s, and he reinvented himself in the 80s. And listen, I just heard him on an album with that a band that my daughter listens to. That's like, you know, they're a bunch of kids, and there's Bruce Springsteen doing a song with them, right? And you think he's doing it again, you know. And he works hard, though. He works hard.
Well, and the other thing he did, he finally had to quit doing it because they would like have to shut down the interstate. He had a big Halloween party. And people in New Jersey would just like he goes, we went over like a couple thousand, and they're like, you got to start getting a permit for this or something. And he just had to shut it down. But it was all about, again, building that community. So I personally, it's funny that I bring him up. I have read his book. I've seen his Broadway special. I've listened to it. I just don't get Bruce Springsteen. He's just not my thing. And realize that's a good point. You can be the boss, and there's still going to be people that go, meh, he's all right. He's okay. Not my favorite, you know. So
you're not going to be the favorite for everybody, and you're going to get emails telling you that, and you got to go, well, okay, you're not our target. You're not my target. You're not one of my people. You know. Tuesday night, I went out in the shed and enjoyed a candle, and then to my audience in Discord, I was like, hey, I'm out hanging out. If you want to join me on StreamYard, do this not recorded, you know. Ed Sullivan jumped in there. Ed was in Miami this week. They jumped in. Randy Walker, one of my listeners, jumped in. You never know. And this was an opportunity to meet one-on-one with these folks, and you got to take some time to do it. And I never would have met Randy any other way than doing this. And sometimes you just have to take a chance and open some things up.
Well, you ready for here's a fun. This came out from. Remember the guys that were on Pacific something? Dan Meisner's his name. That's not actually the thing I want to talk about, but this is a link. You know, the worst day to publish a podcast. You want to guess out of the 7 days?
I don't know. Sunday afternoons.
You would think. No, it's the one we publish on, Jim. That's right. We have the worst day to publish a podcast is Saturday. And so this is a thing that came out from Podchaser, and which I believe is owned by Acast now, if I remember right.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have all sorts of information, and they've came in here, and you can go in. So I guess I kind of consider like at the School of Podcasting is kind of a technology podcast, but you can go in here. What's the best day to publish? I think Wednesday and Thursdays.
No, wait a minute here. In the FAQs, read that statement, because it doesn't say it's the worst day. It says it's the least popular day.
There we go.
So maybe we're doing the right thing because we're not competing with the million of other podcasts that come out during the week. So, it's all how you read it, Dave. It's all how you read it.
Yeah.
Survey questions matter.
But you can download the report. What was that website again?
Gallup.com.
There you go. But you can download the report there. I heard somebody talking about this, and they said the best days are Wednesday and Thursday. But here's my answer to this question. What's the best day to publish your podcast? The one you can do consistently. It is really, I think, more. I don't know if I move this show to Wednesday that all of a sudden be like, because that then turns into the proverbial golden switch, right? Where you're like, oh, that's it. I got 10,000 downloads. What'd you do? Oh, I switched to Wednesday. I don't know that that's because again, I don't know about you. I listen to shows that are months old. It's not like, it's, yeah. So I just one of those.
I think it largely doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Publish when it's convenient for you. If you think there's a day that brings you success, publish it on that day. It's fine. You're going to be just fine with it. I think we're okay. I think we're okay publishing on Saturday.
Yeah. Here's a quick question from the chat. I have a Rodecaster 1 and 2. Do you think renting office space, which when I did, it was $200 a month for other people to buy time to do podcasting themselves? I know people that do it. I have known people that are successful at it, and I've known a few that were not. Because you have to either A, make it really cheap. Because if you think about it, if you charge me $50 and I do 10 episodes, I could have bought my own Rodecaster. At least the one. And you typically have to target small businesses that have a budget that can use this as a tax write-off. So is it a viable business option? I don't know. We had a Wendy's close. I mean, that's a viable business option, but it was in a horrible location and the help was horrible. I don't know. It's like I said, some people are doing it, if I was in New York City, maybe, but if I'm in, Beaver Mud, Mississippi, maybe not. I don't know. What do you think, Jim?
It depends on the situation, right? I think if you're in a situation where maybe you don't have a good studio in your home and you have to rent some space, you did this for a while.
Yeah.
And that allows itself like, hey, I've got all this equipment. Why not rent this equipment? Well, in that case, it takes maybe one or two to make it worth it. Like if you're going into it from just a small business perspective, you got to crunch the numbers in your location and kind of know how many podcasters you have and who would be willing to pay. Those numbers are going to be pretty small. So you got to do the math on that. But if you're going to use it anyway, why not rent that out to others and make a little extra cash on the end? That could work that way if that was something you were already using for sure.
Yeah, that's it. Neil asked, isn't Staples doing this? I know they were. Matthew Passy at thepodcastconsultant.com, because somebody else owns podcastconsultant.com, was the guy that actually helped Staples do that. I don't know that they're still doing it. I know those pop up. I know here in Akron, the Akron Public Library had a podcast room, but it was all glass. So here again, maybe someone should have asked somebody with a little experience. I know Barrel in Kentucky, Jen something. See, this crash and burn here, but she does editing and she does, I think you can come in and use their studio. There was a guy in Detroit that was doing it, so some people have had success, but it's one of those things where this is not hey, if I open it up and put podcast here on a window, it's not a given. You're going to have to market it, and then you have to figure out, are you doing that? Are you delivering a finished episode file, or do you just give them that? Because here's the thing. I mean, I can buy a microphone for $58. I think this is on sale for right now, the Samson Q2U. And, I'm done. If I'm just doing a solo show, it's just a matter of you have to find people that are afraid of technology and have a budget, basically. So the Kim says the one library in another kind of suburb of Akron called Cuyahoga Falls has a video stage. So that's fun. Does the Cigar Authority model happen often? Because that's that same thing.
Yeah, they have a studio. Dave Garoppolo built a studio. They rent that out. They have a lot of folks who come in. Listen, that model works because Dave Garoppolo is an amazing business guy. Yeah. Like, he is a hustler. He works 7 days a week. He's always thinking about new ways to do things. They've hustled that studio. I don't know the numbers on that studio. I don't know if it's profitable or not. It probably is for what they do. He needed it anyways. This is one of the situations where he needed that studio anyways, and they're only using it. Like, you build this gigantic studio for 2 podcasts, the Cigar Authority and Ashholes. Okay, why not rent it out? And yeah, you're going to have to pay a producer to come in and help produce those. Dave doesn't do that work. He pays somebody to do that. The podcasters who pay are basically paying for a producer and some time in there and their time in the shop and in the studio. So could it work? Yeah, totally. He's doing it. He's making it. That's one of those situations where, like, I was going to do it anyway, so we might as well make some money off of it while we're doing it. And Dave Garoppolo is an amazing business guy. He misses no opportunities, takes huge risks, and misses no opportunities.
Yeah, I said 58. It was $58. The Q2U. It's up to 69, which is still a little less than I think they were selling it for, but it's but you hit it, though. It is kind of a risk. The one thing that blew me away is when I had my office, because I just wanted to separate work from home, is I went to get the internet, because I'm like, oh, it's a business, but it's a side hustle, and they went, no, you're a business, and your internet isn't $60 a month now, it's $200. And I was like, wait, what? So, yeah, I put a link in the description there. If you go to support the show, supportthisShow.com/Q2U, that'll take you right over to Sweetwater. Uncle Marv says several studios by me, priced at $35 an hour to $125 an hour with a 2-hour minimum. That's just to record. And realize, take 70% of that, and that's the price, because 30% of that goes to Uncle Sam.
Yep.
So I don't want to say it's not a viable thing. It's a business. You're going to have to, work it and hustle it and that whole 9 yards, and have a little bit of runway money in the bank, and, cross your fingers and say a prayer and put the sign out and see what happens. So, so we'll leave it with that. It's 12 o'clock already. Are we doing a show on Christmas Eve?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Are you okay with it?
I'm okay with that. I will bring my Santa hat. I think I have a Santa hat in the basement. So, do you have a Santa hat?
I do have a Santa hat. Right. Yeah, that'll be. We'll do that. Maybe some follow up to the Mac.
Oh yeah, By then we'll have
the show with. Yeah, we'll do some follow up a little bit.
So, but Jim, any ideas what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv at Home Gadget Geeks?
Yeah, Aaron Lawrence from TechGadgetsCanada.com joins me. We spend some time talking about coffee makers, espresso coffee makers, delicious. The Ember mug. We spent some time with a Samsung projector. Like, is it viable in 2022 to have a projector, and the Amazon TV Fire Cube? So if you're interested in any of those 4 things, and Aaron's just fantastic, HomeGadgetGeeks.com.
Yeah, Uncle Marv says he's going to be out of town next week, going to the in-laws. So for everybody who can't make it next week, have a safe and happy holiday.
We'll record it for you.
Yeah, we'll be here.
Uncle Marv, it'll be there. We'll hit the record button.
Yeah, on the School of Podcasting, I'm talking about, oddly enough, making decisions, and just, again, I'm trying to help people that are overthinking it, because I was overthinking it, and kind of how I came to that decision. And I saved myself $1,000 by asking myself 2 questions. And I'll tell you what those are on the School of Podcasting, because looking back, I'm like, wow, that was close. I almost
I have to go listen to it to know? Can you just tell me right now?
It doesn't even exist yet. So,
okay.
But it'll be out on Monday. That's one of the parts of the School of Podcasting. So, Thanks for everybody for showing up. If we don't see you next week, have a safe and happy holiday. And we're always here every Saturday. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live and AskThePodcastCoach.com/support for those that want to throw us a few shingles. So, and be sure to hit the thumbs up button and the like button. So we'll see you next Saturday. And subscribe right now. Hit the button.